Nothing in this podcast or on our website should be construed as medical advice. Consult your healthcare provider for your individual nutritional and medical needs. The information presented is based on our research and is strictly that of the author and not necessarily those of any professional group or other individual.
Hi, I'm Sue Becker from Bread Beckers. Welcome to Sue's Healthy Minutes. I'm so excited you've joined me today, and I hope this episode encourages you and allows you to find the answers you have been praying for the health of you and your family. Today on Sue's Healthy Minutes, it's time for another It's the Bread story. But today is going to be part of my story. Last year, I had the wonderful privilege of interviewing Kimberly McIntyre of Intyre Healing. Kimberly shared her real bread journey with me. On the same day that I interviewed Kimberly, Kimberly interviewed me to share my story with her clients at Intyre Healing. But I never released her interview with me for Sue's Healthy Minutes, so today is the day. I never get tired of hearing your stories of how real bread has changed your life. Hopefully, you will enjoy hearing just part of mine today, whether for the first time or the 100th time. I hope you will be encouraged.
Hello, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us here at my channel. My name is Kimberly McIntyre. For anyone new to the channel, I am a nutrition and wellness coach. I have the privilege, I've been trying to get together with her for quite some time to bring you guys this information. But I have the privilege of sitting here today with Sue Becker. And one thing that Sue doesn't know is that my journey actually began, once my journey began through nutritional wellness, actually she was a part of that. Bread Beckers here, located in Woodstock, Georgia. One of the first places I visited to start getting some products in my home. That was probably 17 years ago. But anyway, Sue graduated from the University of Georgia, and she has a degree in food science. And I want her to tell us a little bit more about herself, but also we're going to be hearing today about, well, I'm going to say we're going to expose the truth about wheat. Sue, one of the first things that many clients of mine say to me is, when they know that what I do, is they'll say, "Oh, so you don't do wheat and stuff like that."
Yeah.
So it's really funny. So anyway, tell us a little bit about yourself, and let's just get rolling on this subject.
First, I want to tell everyone we are live at Bread Beckers, which is open for business. So you're going to hear noise, background noise, hand trucks, forklifts, everything. So try to ignore that, but enjoy and know that we're a real live brick and mortar
and they're
store.
Really busy.
And we're really busy.
They only have one parking place available.
Yes. Yeah, we're here in Woodstock, Georgia. But I graduated from high school many years ago, headed to the University of Georgia as a pre-med student. Decided when I got there, I'm like, as much as I love the human body and wanted to study nutrition and health and biochemistry and save the world, I went, I don't really want to be in school that long and didn't really want that grueling a career. So I eventually changed my major to food science. It was an up and coming industry at the time. And I actually worked for Kraft Foods as a microbiologist for almost 5 years before I began to have children. I always knew I wanted to be a wife and a mother. And I'm not saying you can't work and do both, but that was my main, thing, my role that I wanted to play. So met my husband at the University of Georgia. We've now been married 48 years. We have 9 children ranging in ages from, my oldest doesn't like me to tell that anymore, but 42 to 27. And we have our 16th grandchild on the way. So that's a little bit about me. I was introduced to the whole concept of milling my own grain and making my own bread, which revolutionized my thinking with my background. When I learned the information about what is done to wheat to make the processed flour and breads that we have on the market today. And then in this journal that I read, it was a brief discussion of the common diseases that plague America. And it all made perfect sense. And I'm like, why didn't I put these pieces of the puzzle together before? Because I loved healthy eating. I fed my family real whole foods, except in the realm of bread. So in 1991, I was introduced to this idea of milling my own grain to make all the bread for my family, and was absolutely sold that no white flour, white bread process was ever coming back in our home. And it hasn't. So bought a grain mill, began to make my bread. The health of myself particularly changed so noticeably and so drastically that I began to pull out my biochemistry books and physiology books and go, what is in this grain that could be doing the things that it's doing to me? And, constipation relieved, my energy levels instantly up. And I had 5 young children when I started. I homeschooled the kids. So we were home, and, you notice if you have more energy when you've got that many kids, and laundry and husbands and homeschooling and dogs and cats and baseball and church and, And then I noticed my dependence on antihistamines went away. Pulled out my biochemistry books going, how is that related? My headaches, I had frequent, chronic, pretty much some heaviness, always a headache, but then migraines every now and then, gone. And my sugar cravings gone, which we weren't real junky eaters. I didn't have processed snacks and candy and Cokes and, sodas and things around. Anyway, like I said, for the most part, we were already eating real food, but the bread was the missing link. Began to notice that my children, my youngest children, and the 2 that were conceived and born after we began milling our grain and making all of our bread, those 2 children never had snotty noses, ever. And I always thought the toddler years, that was just a given. They never did. And neither of them have, even to this day, have ever had an antihistamine or a decongestant a day in their life. It's amazing. So I just began to notice that my children were all around more healthy. We no longer really needed to go to the doctor. In fact, in the bread making years and the child rearing years, my children only needed to go to the doctor twice for an illness. In 25 years,
that's amazing.
That's amazing.
Love it.
Yes. So and so because of the health of my family changed so drastically, I sound a lot like you. I became very passionate. I wanted to share my bread, share what I was learning with others. I began to do that. The next thing I know, they began to ask me, would I teach them how to make bread? Where could they get a grain mill? And that led us to starting our business, Bread Beckers, in 1992 in our tiny little home with then 6 children. And so it was and it's been an amazing journey. We've now, we moved into this facility in 1999. We incorporated with a longtime friend because we really had outgrown it. It was just taking on like wildfire, because I began to study and I began to share the nutritional, biochemical, physiological information that made this all real, and it clicked with people. And when I began to describe the common diseases and how they're directly related and show the relationship, people would come up to me and go, you just described me. And I'm like, I just described America. Mm-hmm. And so a friend would tell a friend, when someone tells you my cholesterol dropped 85 points in a month and all I changed was bread, everyone with high cholesterol starts going, where can I get this and how can I do this? So we moved into this facility in 1999 and then changed this into a classroom in 2009. And we've been going strong ever since.
Well, I'm so glad that you have. And every time that my kids come back home, they want some of that homemade bread because they remember, first of all, it's delicious. And so no wonder you never went back, because there's no reason to. We're not missing out on anything. We're actually getting something better tasting, and then, of course, better for our bodies.
Yeah. So when I hear people say they quit for a while, I'm like, how could you? Why would you?
Right.
And I get it. Life gets in the way, and maybe you weren't as committed in the beginning as I was, but it was all or nothing for me. I'm like, I don't care. I mean, I thought the bread that I made was going to be like the flour that I made was going to be like the whole wheat flour from the store. Have you ever bought it? It's nasty and disgusting, and you could never make a nice fluffy loaf of bread or waffle or pancake or muffin. But I was like, nope, not putting white flour in here. We're doing this if we have to choke it down.
Exactly.
I was absolutely shocked when that bread came out of the oven. And it was delicious. My kids loved it. Mm-hmm. I didn't have to, this was finally a healthy food. I didn't have to coerce them to eat.
That's right. Yep.
You and I probably do all kinds of things, that our kids aren't necessarily wild about,
Right.
Yeah. So the bread, they all love it.
Well, it wasn't too long ago, my son was home and we were going to have hamburgers, and I typically don't eat a bun at all. I just skip it and I'm fine with it. But I'm like, I want a bun, and so I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it. And so I got this book that's right back here, and I did the bun recipe, which it is part bun, and then you get a loaf of bread out of it. So, oh my gosh, they were so amazing.
Yep, I just had a hamburger last night. Yes.
And so good. Delicious. And so you can make a batch and you can freeze half.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to make it the next time. But I don't mind. I mean, to me, it's I love being in the kitchen.
Yeah,
so
I do too. So
it doesn't bother me.
And I tell people, if you like to cook and if you know there's a room in your house called the kitchen and how to turn on your oven, this is easy. And I realize that so much of America's culture now has ventured away from that. We eat out a lot. We eat a lot of processed, ready-made stuff. And so that's an adjustment, but it is so easy. It is the best thing you could ever do for your health and your family. It's just, I've never seen anything like it. And, in my studies and in over lots of years of life now, it is the single most important thing I've ever done that has changed my health so drastically, immediately, noticeably, and that I'm still doing today, 32 years later. How many things can we say that we've tried lifestyle changes?
Tried and true personal experience, which is the best. So tell me, Sue, because I have a lot of people come to me and the first thing that their doctor tells them to do is to go gluten-free. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. That is probably one of the biggest myths propagated on the American public, because what we don't understand is that gluten is not even in grain, okay? It is it's a culinary term for the stretchy substance that forms when wheat flour is hydrated. Wheat is a unique family of grains, and that can be wheat, spelt, rye, barley. Those are in the wheat family. Since the beginning of time, they have always had the genetic makeup of these unique proteins in the flour part. 70% of the wheat flour is protein, and about 80% of those proteins are these specific proteins that when you wet that flour, it forms these stretchy, strong strands of gluten. Why is that important? Because in yeast leavened breads, whether it's sourdough or commercial yeast like we use today, it doesn't matter. Those organisms, when they break down the carbohydrates in that dough and in the wheat or whatever, they produce carbon dioxide gas. You must have those stretchy strands of protein to trap that carbon dioxide gas, and that's what enables the bread to rise. That's all gluten is proteins that enable yeast leavened breads to rise. And that is why wheat, since the beginning of time, has been the leavened bread making grain. You don't make leavened breads or yeast leavened breads out of corn or rice or buckwheat or millet. Of course, not without manipulating it now to, add some starches so it mimics those. But it's always been there. So what's the issue today? Well, in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, it was discovered that the bran and the germ part of that kernel of grain had all the fiber, all the minerals, all the vitamins and the enzymes, and the germ had all the fatty acids and oils. So they discovered what they knew was that flour spoiled. Whole grain flour spoiled. What they discovered was if they sifted the coarser bran portion after it was milled and the oil-laden germ portion away and leave only the white flour, eureka, the flour wouldn't spoil at all. So it led to the invention of these huge steel rolling mills that produced massive volumes of white flour, and white bread now became food for the masses for the first time in history. It was always white flour, white bread was always for the wealthy, the royalty. Even as far back as Rome and the Egyptians, they had servants and slaves and bakers that would sift that away to make their fluffy white bread, okay? So now, though, it was for everybody. Diseases became epidemic that we had never seen before. But what did that mean to the flour? What was left, the white flour, is called the endosperm. What was left is nothing more than protein and starch. What did we say gluten is? Proteins that are in wheat. So now what we have is we have people eating pure protein and starch without the vitamins, without the minerals, without the fiber, without the enzymes, without the good essential oils. And it's constipating because there's no fiber there. So we have all these issues, and it's being blamed on gluten when it's really the processed flour. Now, some people say, well, I don't eat white bread. I only eat the whole grain bread from the store. Well, those proteins that form gluten, they can be isolated out. They'll take dough and they'll just wash it. I mean, literally just keep kneading it in troughs of water until they're left with just this stretchy mass of pure gluten. They dehydrate it and powder it. And unfortunately, in the food industry, that's not considered flour. So they add massive amounts of this isolated gluten-forming proteins to the 100% whole grain bread, or to soy sauce, or to seasoning packets. And so we're getting this isolated form everywhere, and that is not the way God intended us to eat it. So that's a big issue. And then, of course, there's the misinformation that wheat is genetically modified. Just want to state very clearly, there is no genetically modified wheat in this country, sold commercially. It's just not there. Wheat has been bred by traditional breeding methods. And to be honest, the modern wheat that everybody thinks is so bad, it has no more protein than the ancient grains. In fact, some of the ancient grains have more of those gluten-forming proteins than the modern wheat that we have today. So that's a misnomer. And, and then this is another issue that people need to think about. And I don't know how deep I can go here without getting too complicated, but digestion. We need to talk about digestion. Mm-hmm. Americans' digestion stinks for the most part. So, you all know, you chew your food, carbohydrate digestion begins in your mouth. Your saliva has an enzyme called amylase that starts breaking those carbohydrates down. When you swallow that food that you've chewed, which we need to chew our food, you swallow that down. For all practical purposes, carbohydrate digestion basically stops and protein digestion begins. So, protein digestive enzymes, though, need an acid environment. So the stomach, because we are fearfully and wonderfully made, creates all this acid to bring the pH way down, like 3.0, I think. I mean, it's very, very acidic. Could eat a hole in our stomach if God didn't design us with also cells in our stomach that produce mucus to protect all that. But here's the deal. So what is one of the number one drugs that we take in this country?
An antacid.
You got it. So people are taking antacids to neutralize this acid. So what is that doing to our protein digestion?
Ruining
I would think it's compromising it.
Yes.
So, and then
alkalized.
That doesn't get broken down effectively. So it gets shunted over into your small intestine where protein digestion will continue, but it's greatly inhibited, compromised. So then you get undigested proteins getting over into the rest of your digestive system, laying down villi. And the definition of an allergy is actually an exaggerated reaction to a protein component of a food. So now we have all these food allergies. We have leaky gut. And people say, oh, wheat's causing that. No, your fecal material sitting in your bowels not being eliminated is what's causing that. And so it's just sad to me that people are equating gluten with wheat. I had this analogy yesterday because what else troubles me is that I find that health officials, health professionals, whether it's conventional or alternative, and this is the first time in all my years I've seen these two jump on the same bandwagon. Usually they're diametrically on opposite ends of the spectrum, and now they're all wheat's a demon, which wheat feeds more people in the world than any other food, supplies more protein, more calories than any other food. It is the most nutrient-dense food that God has given us, but now it's being demonized, okay? Literally demonized, which is so sad. And what I finally realized after listening to so many health professionals is they're not differentiating between wheat and the stuff that's in the store.
That's right.
They're calling that wheat. Yes, that stuff in the store is inflammatory, causes irritable bowel, causes leaky gut, causes poor digestion, causes sinus. I mean, what did I say I had? I had all these things.
Yes.
And then I didn't give up wheat. I just started making it real the way God created it. So I thought about this yesterday. So they're not differentiating. They're blaming wheat on that stuff in the store. And I'm like, what would be a great analogy? And I thought, paper. Paper is made from wood that comes from a tree, right? You would never call this a tree.
That's right.
So
that's right.
That's my analogy for today.
I like
Why
it.
are we calling that junk in the store wheat? That is not.
Right.
And I read
say it's not even food.
No, it's not even
nourishes.
food.
That's what its intent was.
It doesn't. It may fill your belly kind of, but doesn't satisfy you.
That's right.
That's why we're overeating, because the fiber that's found in the bran and germ portions, those are filling. They're cheap belly fillers. I eat this bread, I'm full. I'm not hungry for hours, So anyway, that's kind of my little.
I love it. I love it.
That's my little soapbox for the
day. Okay, what about phytic acid? This is a
biggie.
Golly. It's a biggie.
Oh gosh, that actually came from back in the 1940s. There was studies done, and they determined that phytic acid bound with minerals. And it does indeed, but here's the exciting thing. It's a powerful chelator.
Yes.
It binds with minerals for several reasons, so you don't over-absorb things like iron that are detrimental to your health if you get too much. It leaches out the heavy metals that our bodies get exposed to just now today, even more with all the radiation that we get, from lights, from microwaves, from X-rays, from all of this that we're now more and more exposed to. It leaches those toxins out. So it's a powerful antioxidant. It is not at all an anti-nutrient. A biochemist wrote a book, Diet for Atomic Age. It's an old book. It's fascinating. And she says that it's not an anti-nutrient at all. And the more toxic our world gets, the more our diet needs to be grains and beans to leach out these toxins.
Right.
So that is just sad that that's misinformation. Your body produces phytase in your gut to break down the phytic acid, so not too much is there, but it does an important job. And sprouting the grain and drying it, yes, some people say they can digest it better, and I'm not going to argue with that. Maybe they can. Soaking the flour in water overnight, or diminishes very small amount of the phytic acid. And then a lot of people talk about sourdough bread, long ferments, breaking down more of the phytic acid, and that's true to an extent. But again, that's coming at things from the perspective that phytic acid is a bad thing. And I can promise you the information that I've read that says, oh, well, wheat is harvested differently today. It was left out in the field to partially germinate, or I heard one guy this last week, to ferment, that they cut it, they shock it, tie it up in sheaves and stand it up so that it gets the dew. No. I contacted our grain elevator, and he laughed at that when I said, this is what's being said. He said, if I sent you partially germinated wheat and fermented wheat, you would send it back because it would be rotten and spoiled. So that's just a misnomer.
Well, I do think it's important to mention, because EMFs, we're exposed heavily, and that can help protect against the EMFs.
Yes, exactly.
In your own home.
Yes,
so exactly. Another reason. And so in my program, the majority of the time, I send people to the grocery store, and I do tell them to get Ezekiel, Food for Life. But the reason is because they're not going to go home and make their own.
Right. I understand.
But if they would, and some have, then that's ideal for sure.
Yeah.
But I have considered, selling it, making it, but we'll see what happens with that. But that would be ideal. But so it's like, what can I do to get, this person who's eating Wonder Bread? Yeah. And so that is a big, huge step in the right direction. And if you don't have time, it is better than, for sure.
Well, and what I tell people, then why not adapt more of the Mediterranean lifestyle? Boil the grains and make whole grain salads. they're delicious.
Right.
You
and
know,
put it on there.
Eat more beans and rice. You know,
Yes.
most of the world eats beans and grains, you know, for their diet. We have ministry in Haiti and ministry in Tanzania. And, you know, when I started going to Haiti, particularly, you know, the kids are living in the orphanage. They eat, as my husband says, beans and rice for breakfast and rice and beans for dinner. You know, that's it. They don't have a lot of access to sodas or candy until the Americans come and buy them all that because they think, oh, these poor children. They don't have access to a lot of medical help, so they don't use the heavy use of antibiotics, not there. No vaccines. I go down there and we make bread. We are feeding, you know, 1,200 kids a day, bread made from freshly ground whole grains. We're taking it into the schools. And guess what they're smearing it with? Peanut butter. Someone asked me, said, did you have to get permission? We're like, no, we take it in a tub and say, here it is, you know, and there's 10.
Nobody's allergic.
No. And that's the thing. No child has ever said, is this gluten-free? We smear it with peanut butter. There's no peanut butter allergies. And at first I thought, well, maybe it's local peanut butter. No, Americans send peanut butter down there by the masses.
Wow.
So what is going on
What
in
is
this
the difference?
country?
Right.
What is the difference? I think there's a lot of things involved, but I think the biggest thing, and I quote a doctor, I usually have it on my iPad, but I'll try to, here's what he says. The heavy use of antibiotics, anti-inflammatory drugs like Advil and Aleve, the heavy use of antacids like Nexium and Prilosec, coupled with a high sugar, low fiber diet, has all led to these gluten sensitivities and food allergies. Totally agree.
Yes.
Listen to the things that he says cause this. Unfortunately, the very next words in that quote is, that is why wheat and gluten should be completely avoided. Wheat is the biggest offender. And I'm like,
wow.
I did not hear wheat anywhere in that lineup of what causes this.
Right.
You know, and I'm just like, why did you go from here to wheat is the biggest problem?
Right.
Maybe it's caused you to have a reaction to wheat or the processed stuff in the store. I cannot tell you how many hundreds of people today, since this whole anti-grain, anti-wheat, anti-gluten phenomenon came about, once they hear the truth, they learn, they see the video, Real Bread, The Staff of Life, and they're like, okay, this makes sense. And they start milling their own. They have no reaction at all. None.
Amazing.
Not only can they tolerate bread made from freshly ground, even wheat, they get well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, recently on my podcast, I did an interview, girl, Sarah Valentine, been gluten-free for 10 years. And she said, I didn't cheat. Gluten, a speck of it would just send me just terrible abdominal cramps and everything. And she was actually told that she probably was celiac as a young girl. She never had the test because once she went off the gluten, she said, oh, I felt night and day difference. It was phenomenal. So her mother, though, had gone gluten-free with her, but her mother had recently, after 10 years, heard my teaching, came, got a mill, started making bread for her family. Her brother's children had constipation issues, kids, you know, now it's not an old person's problem. The bread turned all of this around. So she comes home for a visit and she says, she sat there and stared at that bread and they were all like, just try it, just try it. And she was like, I was terrified. I was not, because I know what it does to me. She said, finally, I decided, I'll just give this a try. She goes, Sue, I had the best night's sleep I've had in years.
Wow.
I had the best poop the next morning that I've had in years. And my energy she said, I got no headache, no stomach distress. And she said, we got up the next morning. My mom and I went to the store and we made donuts, we made bagels, we made muffins, we made all this. And I took some home with me and I've been eating it nonstop ever since. And she goes, I have never felt better.
It's amazing.
And this is the best I've felt in the last 10 years. And she said, I only have two things to say. Either I truly was not a celiac or God miraculously healed me.
Right.
And she said, I don't know, but all I can tell you is
She can eat it.
I can eat this bread when before I could not eat anything that had wheat gluten in it. And of course, that's all the processed stuff.
It's amazing.
Yeah, that's just one of so many testimonies.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I like to share with people. You know, celiac disease affects less than 1% of the American population. That is a whole lot less than we're hearing, you know, all these people having to go gluten-free. And I get it. I understand. You quit eating that bread in the store, you're going to feel better.
Yes.
You're going to feel better.
That's right.
But you don't have to give up bread, and wheat is not the culprit.
Yes.
So if you're celiac, you will never be able to eat wheat because you are you're born with the inability to digest two amino acids that are particularly form the gluten in flour. It's gliadin and glutenin, and celiacs can't break down the gliadin. So that's going to lay down your villi, cause all kinds of digestive upset and issues. So a celiac can't mill your own grain if you're a true celiac. What's being diagnosed today is not necessarily true genetic celiac disease. It may be what's called non-genetic celiac disease, which they're not telling you that. But if you've been able to eat bread and then all of a sudden in your 40s, 20s, 30s, whatever, you start having all these issues, chances are you're not a true genetic celiac. You would know from the time you're young. But non-genetic celiac disease, people are being diagnosed with because they have all the symptoms. Mm-hmm. Yeah, your villi is laid down. Yeah, you got colitis. You've got severe inflammation because the stuff in the store that they call wheat has done this to you.
Yep.
And the sad American diet, you know, heavy use of antibiotics, all those 1, 2, 3, 4 things that you mentioned. The good news is real bread made from freshly ground, even wheat, can heal you, can reverse all of that. And you will come out much better on the other side. So,
and you get to eat something delicious all at the same time.
Yes. And I heard one doctor say that actually started the whole anti-gluten thing. He goes, getting rid of wheat is the easiest thing you can do. And I'm like, I don't know what planet you live on, but that is not an easy thing.
No.
You obviously have never been to the grocery store, because once you leave the perimeter of the grocery store, and you get past the juice aisle and the canned fruits and vegetable and maybe the condiments, every other food aisle in the grocery store has wheat and flour. It's grains. That's our biggest food source that we have.
Yep.
So
that's right.
It's not easy. And the good news is, chances are you're not true celiac, and chances are you don't need to give up bread. You just need to eat it the way God created it.
That's right. In the right way.
Yep.
Okay, there was a couple of other things that I wanted to make sure that we covered, and one of them is, because it's a new term for me, and it's called 00 wheat. Have you heard of this?
Not wheat, but it's a term for flour.
Okay.
And it usually a lot of bread makers like it because it's got a high protein content. It's a bread making wheat that's usually imported. That's a European
from Italy
term,
or something.
From Italy, yes.
So some people are saying that they can eat it and they couldn't eat anybody else's, that it's not upsetting their stomach.
Yeah.
What gives with that?
You know, I hear that a lot with people will say that they can go to Europe and eat bread, but they can't eat American bread at all, even white bread, you know. And I don't fully understand what might be going on there, other than because it's still sifted and it's still white bread and it's still pure gluten and starch. Either they're not adding more pure gluten to it. That might be one thing. Also, I don't know what the regulations and how flour is processed in other countries. Unfortunately, in this country, the flour is conditioned with potassium bromate. It's also exposed to benzoyl peroxide, a chlorine derivative, to bleach the residual oils and vitamin E that's there that turns the flour kind of yellow, gives it little yellow specks. So can't have white flour with yellow specks now, can we? So they bleach it. That could be it. I don't really know. And they'll say, oh, it's because the wheat here in America is genetically modified. That is just not true. Hate to tell you. It's just, no, I don't hate to tell you. I'm delighted to tell you that it's just not true. So I don't fully understand that, but I've heard it so many times.
And maybe they're using wheat similar to what you and I are using. Maybe it's just a finer blend, and maybe
could be
interesting.
Yeah, I know here in America they do. And I don't. Let me see if I can find a better word. I hate to use the word manipulated because people think modified, GMO. The commercial white flour, all-purpose flour, bread flour that we buy in the store, and what bakeries buy, they do. It has to have a certain protein content to form that gluten, so that bakeries get a consistent rise every time. Mm-hmm. So they will mix other, high protein wheats with it. They may put pure gluten flour in there. I don't know, but they do manipulate it because sometimes the crop this year is not as good. And even by taking the bran and germ out, it may not be high enough protein to get a good yield at the bakery. So I know that sometimes they work with it to fix it
right,
so that it has the right protein content by mixing other flours with it. So I don't know if I don't know. That's a good question. And but I know that it doesn't have anything to do with the wheat that's grown here. It's probably more the flour, what they're doing to the flour.
So if somebody wants to get on this bandwagon and start doing their own, which mill would you recommend?
Well, I love the Wonder Mill.
Okay.
I just love the Wonder Mill. It may be because it's the mill I've used all these years. It wasn't the mill I started with. The mill I started with was micronizing milling heads, but I don't even think that it's made anymore. The Wonder Mill was a step-up improvement. People laugh and they're like, this is quiet. But anyway, it's much quieter than the mill I started with. But I like the durability of the Wonder Mill. It doesn't have a wide range of coarse to fine. It pretty much is going to make flour. So it doesn't pre-crack or give you a coarse meal, but I just use a blender for that. Everybody's got a blender. So that's the mill. I like it. It's fast. It's clean. The flour goes into a closed canister. I like that. It's just my husband and I at home now. I don't know. The stone mills have become very, very popular. There's nothing magical about a stone mill and the stones and all of that. In fact, my mother-in-law years ago started with a stone mill, and here in the South, because the stones do collect oils, it attracted bugs to it. Yeah. So, and then I had another people that every year they brought out their stone mill to use at a fair, and every year they would call and say, "Your corn has bugs in it." No, we found it was coming from the little weevils that had collected in the stone mill. And that was, what was happening there. So that's why I like the stainless steel micronizing mills. And I just like how fast and clean, and you can mill 12 cups of flour really fast.
Yes.
And for my family, when my kids were home, I was making 6 loaves of bread twice a week. There was no freezing it. We were eating it, and interspersed in that was muffins, pancakes, waffles, cookies, cakes, whatever. Mm-hmm. So it was just the mill I've used. It's very durable, less than 1% repairs of the thousands that are sold in this country. Also, Bread Beckers, we can repair them should you have a problem with it, or should you clog it up, or should you run something like flaxseed that you're not supposed to run through there. And that's a plus for us. And it's a reasonably priced mill. Most of the stone mills are quite an investment. So they're prettier, I give it that, but I don't think anything's gonna top the use and practicality of the Wonder Mill.
I'm glad you said that, because that's the one that I have.
Yeah, the Wonder Mill.
Yes.
Yeah, I love it. And I love the company, and not that other companies aren't nice, but they're just so easy to work with. If we have a problem, they are on it. They send us parts to, repair and it's very seldom do we have to repair. Usually it's someone has clogged it or something, So it's just, I love it. I love how easy it is to use.
Yeah, it is.
And it cleans itself.
Right,
An appliance
exactly.
that you don't have to take apart and wash and dust. And some people say, oh, but I can't take it apart and just that. Well,
Why?
Yeah.
Why do
Like
that?
if I want grits, then I just throw a cup in the blender and in 30 seconds or less, I've got grits. Or if I want to pre-crack, just run it in a blender. And like I said, we all have blenders.
Right.
So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm saying this because it's going to make me hold it and do it because I've been thinking about this for a long time. I am going to put out some videos on how to go through the process because it can be overwhelming. It's not overwhelming.
It's not.
You just have to do it. And so just breaking it down, being able to see it. But Sue has a YouTube, right?
Yes, Bread Beckers YouTube channel.
Lots of information on
Lots
there.
of videos
She
there.
also has podcasts, and I highly recommend you get on there because the information is deep and rich, and you're going to be glad that you did. I started out with CDs, which I still have in the car, and I've listened to those because the information, to me, it's exciting.
Yeah.
And especially, some of the things that you say that relate back to the Bible, and that's what it's all about. And that's what got me involved in this in the first place. Yeah. Like there's all kinds of diets. And I said, Lord, you had a diet that you intended for us. And that's the one that I want to teach people.
Yes.
And that's what I do. So it's just been really exciting.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you so much for having this conversation and
so
letting
welcome.
us know all of this information that people just really need to hear.
Yeah.
To me, it's freeing.
Yes.
And
that's the main
biggest thing.
Yeah. When people say I don't have time to make my own bread, I'm like, wow, I don't have time not to because I know where I'd spend the rest of my time. It'd be taking my children to the doctor, dealing with headaches and in bed, This is the most beneficial first step to healthy eating and living that you can imagine.
And like you said, one of the most nutrient dense products on the planet.
Yes. Grains and beans are the most nutrient dense food God has given us. And not only are they good for you, they're storable. In Genesis, God says, I've given you plants that bear fruit. That's our fruits and vegetables. Delicious, healthy, vitamins, minerals, soluble fiber. You need to eat them. But then he said, and I give you plants that bear seed for fruit. And that's our grains and beans. And why did he do that? Because fruits and vegetables spoil, rot, and decay. We got to have something that's last through the harvest till next year, and that's our grains and beans, and they're storable. So
very important. Yeah,
there may come a day
and you'll wish you had your big
food
50 or whatever the gallon bucket,
6 gallon bucket,
6 gallon bucket,
42 pounds of grain and beans.
That's right. I buy mine in those buckets, and it's just easy to store. They have gamma lids that you can put on there. So Woodstock, that's where their store is located. I love to just come here and browse and just look at all of the things that they have to offer, and you're going to wish you could take all of them home with you, and maybe you will over time.
Well, and we also have classes. We have cooking classes that you can come and join live here in the store, but we also have lots already videoed online, and we also offer live stream for some of the classes too, so you can join in live.
Oh, nice, virtually. Great. That's
and then the podcast Sue's Healthy Minutes. And it's funny you mentioned CDs. When we first started, we started with cassettes, then we morphed to CDs because cassettes went out, and then all of a sudden nobody would take the CDs because we don't have a CD player anymore. So that's why I did Sue's Healthy Minutes podcast.
It's perfect. So get on there and check it out. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. If you have not subscribed to my channel and you're liking this content, if you would go ahead and do that, there's going to be a lot more information, and it's all things health. So you guys have a great day.
Yes.
Sue's Healthy Minutes podcast has been a presentation by the Bread Beckers Incorporated, located in Woodstock, Georgia. For more information, store hours, and learning opportunities, visit breadbeckers.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Share this with 2 friends who would benefit from this information, and be sure to join us again next week for more of Sue's Healthy Minutes.